Give us one too, Bill.
I don't know where they're at.
Are they down there?
No, they should be, but they're not.
Bring our own Kleenex now?
Mike, are you gonna
I
use
go upstairs
your, your, and
Outside.
after them.
Bring our chairs off it. Okay.
Put them in that storage down below.
Where the hell?
where it was? I had it and now I don't.
Got a promotion. I can clean her,
What?
pick her up or two.
Was Mr. Sanchez?
You surprised by me?
Yeah.
You do have four.
Who?
Yeah, you have you, Leonard, Juby, and Teppy.
When?
I'm tired.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think.
I was a bull.
And the felon was sweating. I can tell you.
No, no.
No, Lewis.
Election.
Oh my God.
Today.
One of the residents who said, you know, every lie you could dream of about me.
See that? That was.
So taxes, levies, do we have to take them separately?
Yes.
I mean,
You didn't need to say it. Could have said.
I say, here's
I
what I
I
am
never
now.
knew this.
Yeah, right. I completely agree.
Thanks, sweet.
I have to tell you a story. It's a long story about this.
Good morning.
Morning.
Look at the devil. That's kind.
We have a chance.
It did sound like about that, maybe it was too.
We can present whatever we have.
Can you hear him?
Kathy.
Roller coaster.
We were just celebrating.
Who's growling in the microphone?
I don't know. I gotta get on Zoom and see.
All right,
I heard. How is it?
it, 11:03, I'd like to call to order our special King County Finance and Budget Committee meeting of Thursday, November 7th, 2024. Could we have roll call, please?
Juby. Juby here. Lewis.
Here.
Sanchez. Surges. Pepe.
Teppy here.
Leonard.
Leonard here.
Berman.
Irma's here.
Pirog. Thank you. You have an in-person.
I have no remote attendance requests. I'd like to get approval of our minutes. We have none. Public comments. I have one public comment signed up. Two. Oh. Oh, first, Terry Hunt.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Terry Hunt. I'm here on behalf of the Kane County State's Attorney's Office. And I apologize for reading my comments to you, but I'm trying to squeeze a lot into the 3 minutes. My comments are on the subject of the FY25 budget, but they don't change that budget in any way. I'm trying to provide the members of the county board some clarification and context for certain portions of the draft budget report that's included in today's agenda. We created accompanying slides. They'll be made available for any board member upon request. So next slide, please. The draft report itself that was prepared by the finance director is very thorough and addresses a lot of the questions. Next slide. The comments that are included in mine are only in regards to the state's attorney's budget and only in reference to the displayed budget that has been on public display for a couple of weeks now. Next slide, please. So on page 5, it references headcount. Headcount is undeniably a contributing factor to the increased expenses. However, page 5 references the general fund, and that's not the case. So the numbers that are stated, 130 to 199 are the entire state's attorney's budget, including the civil division and all the state special revenue funds as well. If we do filter it down to just the general fund positions, there's an increase of 47, starting from 87 in FY20 to 134 in the proposed FY25 budget. Next slide, please. So there are some factors to explain how those changes came about. In FY21, the county board responded to the increased need and created the mental health unit and abuse and neglect unit, which added 9 new positions. Next slide, please. The next year, we same sort of situation. We got approval from the county board to increase the physical or create the physical abuse unit and cyber crimes, added 7 new positions. We also were awarded $1.2 million 3-year grant in the COSAP, which helped us create the collaborative diversion unit, added 5 salary positions, 4 of which were entirely funded by the COSAP grant. Next slide, please. Safety Act, we've responded to that a couple of times. That added 13 new positions between ASAs and administrative and technical staff. So collectively, those changes that were approved by the county board accounted for 34 of the increased positions. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we did differently this year was to implement the position control tool, which changed the way the comparisons could be made. In FY20, temporary employees like law clerks and interns were not part of the headcount. In FY25, they are. So our FY25 budget includes 10 law clerks and temporary interns and expenses of nearly $168,000. Next slide, please. This is just the background to the budget calendar that identified the guidelines that were implemented by this committee. 2.5% increase in salaries, 3% increase in contractual and commodity expenses. And in June, it was allowed that the elected officials would submit budgets that did not adhere to the next slide, please. However, the state's attorney's office submitted its original budget with a 2.04% increase and a 1.52% reduction in commodities and contractual expenses. Additionally, we only had 2 vacant positions, which was less than what was allowable under the suggested policies. Next slide, please. August, this committee unilaterally suggested reductions of 4.8% across the board in certain offices and departments, including the state's attorney's office. Next slide, please. We had already reviewed our budget in terms of identifying potential savings, and we had complied with every guideline previously suggested. And because the state's attorney had already done that hard work, we were not in a position to cut an additional $500,000. So that's like, let no good deed go unpunished. Next slide, please. So the employees of the state's attorney's office have increased over the 4 years, responding to changes in needs and state mandates. It's also noteworthy that the state's attorney's office has operated under budget in 21, 22, 23, and we will be under budget again when 24 is closed. Next slide, please. So the state's attorney's office general fund expense budget for FY24 is $10.9 million. The draft budget currently on display is $11.1 million, represents an increase of $233,000 or 2% overall. Next slide, please. And we do recognize and appreciate the complexity of the process and the amount of time and effort put in by the finance department and this committee. But I think it was important to make certain underlying details clear to the county board members to assist them to make an informed decision. I got any time left?
Yes.
Cool. All right. Yeah, I timed it out. I should have 4 seconds.
Okay,
All right.
I'll give you 5.
All right. Thank you.
Speaker is Jamie Moser.
I actually don't need to. I signed up in case he didn't meet the 3 minutes if he exceeded it. But I would take this time to thank Terry Hunt because the work of this budget is everything to do with him in terms of what he's done to make sure that we are fiscally responsible. So thank you, Terry.
Thank you for that information. That's sir.
Mr. Chairman, Surges,
Sturgis,
requesting permission to join, sir.
permission to what?
Join the meeting, Surges.
Join the meeting?
Yeah.
Make it so.
Remotely attending.
Budget 10
Vote
remotely.
attendance, you would like.
Well, that was. That request supposed to be done before the meeting?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
that presentation, could the board get that presentation? Could you request it?
Certainly.
Okay.
Let's address the remote attendance.
The whole board.
All right, remote attendance. Mr. Sturgis.
No problem.
Very good. You're approved.
Thank you.
Need approval of minutes. We have none. Oh, I said, public comments, new business. Item A. My idea here was to answer any, everybody submitted their questions. And our executive director of the finance department came up with the answers. And I think those answers were presented to everyone. I do not want to go through those questions and answers. I guess what I would like to know is that, did everybody get their answers, their questions answered? Or do you have other questions at this point in time? Ms. Juby?
Well, I've been going back and forth. Questions have been answered, but that's okay. I do have a question now because of what Mr. Hunt said. So if the state's attorney's office is under 2% and a bunch of the other ones are under, who actually is over that's making that 12 to 18% that you told us about?
Well, all the departments, the general fund budget, the salaries are up across all departments.
But he just said that they were at 2% over last year, so I don't
It could be
understand.
for his department.
But-
I don't have that number right in front of me right now. I don't have that number, but clearly, a lot of the departments are up over last year because we wouldn't have the 2025 budget that we have.
But you don't know which ones are actually
Not
over.
off, I don't have it memorized, no.
Okay.
Any other questions? Any other?
I can get that information.
Then item B is a discussion of our budget. Obviously, our budget was presented and approved by the Finance Committee. Moved on to the Executive Committee. And the Executive Committee made a couple changes to the budget. I think the changes were our salary increases from cost of living and a 1% merit increase. And the total of that was $388,673. That then will have to be amend our budget when it's presented at our full board meeting. Do we have any questions? Would you, Kathleen, would you like to present?
Mr. Bourbon?
Sure.
Could you, I believe that the executive committee has the authorization to approve the presented budget to the full board the following week. It'll be next week. So those numbers that you just reflected should be included in the presentation, just as a reminder, so that the executive committee can make that amendment and at least pencil it in before the full board is aware and can take their vote.
Oh, it was passed by the executive committee at the last meeting.
But it's still, just as a protocol.
Still needs to be
Yeah, just to go through,
good enough.
just housekeeping, that's
We
all.
will address that then. Kathleen,
Do you want me to go through the presentation?
please.
Okay. This was sort of a summary, and I just want to say I will, maybe for the executive committee, have the percentages by department in the general fund. So this was a summary of sort of the answers to all of the questions that were asked, and I just put it together in a PowerPoint presentation just to summarize, because there were a lot of similar questions asked. So we'll just start off with what's going on in the general fund. So here's just a history from 2015 to 2023, the average increase per year in salaries and wages, employee benefits, contractual services and commodities. And just so everyone knows, the only employee benefits that are rolling through the general fund are health and dental insurance. Payroll taxes and pension costs are for employees that are budgeted out of our general fund, are paid out of two entirely separate funds. They're paid out of a fund called FICA Social Security, which is our payroll taxes, and then they're paid out of our IMRF fund, which is for pension. Employees who are budgeted in special revenue funds across the county, it's treated entirely differently. For example, the health department, all of their employee benefits, their health and dental insurance, their pension, their payroll taxes are all coming out of the same fund. General fund is different that way. So salaries and wages have gone up on average 4.93%. Just over the last 8 years. Employee benefits have gone up 5.66%. Contractual services have gone up 7.47%. Commodities 2.88%. And also there was, what's the difference between contractual services and commodities? I'll start with commodities first. Commodities are things generally like utilities, water, gas, electric, supplies, office supplies, things like that. Contractual services are more of your consulting services, type of costs, software, things like that. Salaries are the largest component of our general fund expenses and have increased from 46 million in 2015 to 70 million in 2023, an increase of 24 million. Revenue. Same period of time from 2015 to 2023, the average increase per year. Other taxes, again, this is just the general fund. Other taxes is our sales tax revenue, our income tax revenue, RTA sales tax revenue, et cetera. It's the nice bright green line there. You could see, it's not the green line, sorry. It is the line that is, what color is that? It is green. It is, it is green. Property tax revenue has gone up on average 0.21%. And since 2017, the county has been taking the increase in new construction. Grant revenue has gone up 7.51%. Interest revenue, 35.95%. Which is really a pickup just in the last couple of years. Licenses and permits, a little over 10%. Grants, 7.5. Well, I've got grants on there twice. Reimbursements, 2.99%. And charges for services have actually gone down and fines have gone down. So charges for services are things like e-revenue. It's actually gone down over the last other years. So other taxes, which include sales taxes, jumped in 2021, as you can see there with inflation, but this past year they've been leveling off, but still providing an extra 15 million per year in the last, in 2022 and 2023. This is just a drill down into the other tax revenue. Again, what we call other tax revenue on all of our financial reporting and the way that we categorize it. Sales taxes, RTA sales taxes, income tax, local use tax, and personal property replacement tax. And just to highlight county financial policy as it exists today, The RTA sales tax revenue, when it comes into the county, it goes into 4 separate funds. The general fund only gets 10% of it. The majority of it goes to the transportation department. But as you can see in this presentation, sales tax revenue jumped up significantly. And then also, just to add, the sales tax revenue, the state sales tax and the RTA sales tax are taxing different items. Because I sometimes get that question a lot, why aren't the lines exactly the same? Because they're taxing different types of items. So that's why those two are not exactly the same. Personal property replacement tax has been a big fluctuating category of tax revenue for us. It jumped up for 2 years in a row, and then now it's coming back down. And as we talk about in the monthly finance committee meetings, the state keeps adjusting that number downwards. So a couple of years ago, we got 5 million. This year, we will probably get less than 3 million. And again, the sales tax and the RTA sales tax revenue has been leveling off this year. Headcount has been a topic that the board has asked a lot of questions about. We've received emails from the board and questions at committee meetings over the last several months. We recently sent out a report to the entire board that showed headcount changes over the last, from 2020 to 2025, by all the offices and departments across the entire county. On this slide, we're just highlighting some of the offices that had the most significant changes in all of their department headcount. So state's attorney, sheriff, IT, and buildings management. Questions have come up about union and non-union wage increases. Just to kind of go over the process, the county board approves all the collective bargaining agreements. There is a separate labor management committee of the board that oversees this whole process with the state's attorney's office, sits in on those meetings, and the staff of that department. There have been some questions about, does the county finance department and the county HR department, are they involved in these union negotiations? And at this time, that is not something that we are participating in. But this is just a schedule of all the union contracts and all the rate increases. And just to kind of go over how we did the budget again, the budget includes all these rate increases for all the union employees, where a contract is expiring at November 30th, 2024. We put a placeholder of 2.5% at the time of putting the budget together, because we don't have a new rate increase. The non-union increases are recommended by County Finance Committee at the beginning of this budget process this year. The Finance Committee members provided guidance and instructions to the Finance Department to use 2.5% in the 2025 budget for non-union cost of living increases. Elected offices are provided, and just also to distinguish the difference between what goes on between elected offices and non-elected offices. And it was part of the ordinance that was recently passed by the board for the cost of living increases. So elected offices are provided a budgeted amount of a cost of living increase, but elected offices can choose how they distribute that to the employees in their office because they have internal control over their offices. Non-elected departments follow the county's compensation policy, which was adopted by this county board last year. And so cost of living increases are distributed to each employee in a non-elected office, which is why a separate 1% merit pool was approved by the county board to be included in the 2025 budget for non-union staff in non-elected offices, so that the non-elected offices can give an employee a raise in addition to the cost of living and merit pool, in addition to the cost of living. The budgeting process, a lot of questions too about who enters the budget. So every county office and department across the county enters their own budget. They have staff in their office. They have access to New World. They enter their contractual services, their commodities, their capital. They enter their revenue amounts into the software. The finance department, where we come in and assist, we obviously enter the budget for our own finance department, but we upload all the position data. We move it from our payroll module into the position budgeting module, apply the increases, have the offices and departments verify it, and then we move it to the budget maintenance module. And the sales tax, income tax type revenue items, those are a handful of the items in the general fund that the finance department does enter. And how do we come up with those estimates for those sort of categories of revenue, what we call general government revenue? We take a look at the state of Illinois budget, which was already issued for their fiscal year, July 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2025. We look at what the state is saying about their forecasts for those categories of tax revenues. We look at the Illinois Municipal League website. We also look at our own trends over the last 12 months, and we come up with an estimate. And that's how we come up with an estimate for sales taxes, income taxes, personal property replacement taxes, et cetera. And specifically with personal property replacement taxes, the Illinois Department of Revenue website has been putting a lot of information out about that because of the changes in their estimates. So we keep an eye on their website for that information to inform us to come up with numbers for the budget. Some questions too on how does the state or how is the state distributing certain types of sales tax revenue? So state sales tax revenue is based directly on retailer returns, monthly returns. The local government distributive fund revenue, which includes the income tax revenue, and the PPRT revenue are distributed on an estimated basis. And then they require a true up at the year end because they were distributed on an estimated basis. So just quickly go through the budget process for this year. So in February, the County Finance Committee provided guidance to all the departments for the budget for all of the funds to try to hold their budgets to 3% over their 2024 budget for contractual services and commodities, to budget a 2.5% non-union cost of living increase, and to keep vacant positions to a total of, was based on a sliding scale, but no more than 4. In June, the Finance and Budget Committee amended that policy and allowed the elected offices to submit a budget that did not necessarily adhere to those, to that guidance. In July, a draft 2025, so the elected officials did go in and amend their budgets. On July 24th, a draft budget was presented to the County Finance and Budget Committee. And then on July 20th, August 12th, and August 19th, the County Finance and Budget Committee held 3 special meetings for the purpose of cutting expenses. And on August 12th, the Finance and Budget Committee amended a draft resolution to cut $5 million instead of $10 million from the general fund. And this is just a slide of the proposed cuts by office and departments. At the end of the day, the Finance Committee cut $639,000 in total from IT, Finance, County Board, and Supervisor of Assessment offices. And on September 4th, the Executive Committee then amended the budget again because the budget had included a transfer of $4 million in RTA sales tax revenue from the transportation funds to the general fund. And had also, so on September 4th, the Executive Committee removed that transfer of $4 million, which required the general fund to use more of its reserves. Also at that same meeting, the executive committee added an additional $6 million transfer from the general fund to the capital projects fund. So at that meeting, an additional $10 million in reserves were budgeted to be needed to balance the general fund for a total of 29 million. On September 10th, the county put the budget on public display. And then on October 16th, the county voted down the draft budget, and at that same meeting voted to give non-union employees a 3.2% cost of living and 1% merit pool. And just to kind of go over fund balance and reserves, what is the policy? So the county, this county had for many years had a policy of maintaining a reserve of 90 days for the general fund. And then in spring of 2023, when the county had a interim executive director, that individual brought forth or through working with the finance committee to change that policy to having reserves of 180 days. The county board then subsequently last fall changed it back to 90 days. There is no written county policy on what should be done with reserves in excess of a minimum that should be held for emergency purposes, because I know that question came up, is what should we do with those reserves? So that's truly just completely up to the county board. Just to kind of go over the history of the CARES and ARPA Act funds. And I actually really enjoyed putting all these slides together, believe it or not, on the CARES and the ARPA Act funds. And I hope the visual is very helpful. But essentially for 3 years in a row, 2020, 2021, and 2022, the county paid salaries and expenses instead of paying them out of the general fund, they paid them out of another fund. And so forever, unfortunately, if you're looking at comparative data, comparing 2019 to 2020 to all the way up through 2023, it's never going to give you a good comparison. And it's going to be like that forever because of the choices that were made on how salaries were going to be paid. Salaries that should normally have historically always been paid out of the general fund, which is Fund 001, were paid out of two other funds. They were paid out of Fund 353 and 355. So it looks like when you look at it on at the general fund on the surface, it looks like expenses dropped. They didn't really drop. They were just, it's like if you had a company and you had 3 divisions and you always paid all your salaries out of Division A, it would be like for 3 years in a row, you paid some of your salaries out of Division C, and then you moved them back to paying them out of Division A. That's essentially what happened here. So $38.5 million in county salaries were paid out of federal CARES and ARPA Act monies because they met the definition of pandemic eligible expenses. And the requirements were that we had to report it this way, which is why those monies were paid for out of Fund 353, which was our coronavirus relief fund, and Fund 355, which is our American Rescue Plan fund. Since the general fund continued to receive all of its, so during those same 3 years, the general fund continued to receive all of its normal revenues, such as property tax. We didn't reduce property tax levies during those 3 years. The income tax revenue still came in, the sales tax revenue still came in. So it looks like we made money, so to speak, during those 3 years because we paid for the expenses out of a different fund, which is why I have used the phrase that it created a situation that made it look like we had more money suddenly than we did, which we did in the general fund. So if the general fund had not received, if we had not used CARES and ARPA Act monies to pay salaries for those 3 years, the general fund balance would have decreased each year, starting in 2020. So here's just another slide. So the gross expenditures in the general fund for 2020 are actually 84 million, but what we are reporting in our audit is 66, because those $18 million were paid for out of another fund for that year, and so forth and so on. So over a 3-year period, 38.5 million was paid for out of other funds. Let's see. Next slide. Little background on government fund accounting. In the terms revenues and expenses, just to kind of set the stage for some of the next pages. So in governmental fund accounting, we use the term expenses, we use the term revenues, and we use the term transfers in. And we use the terms expenses, and then we use the term transfers out. So transfers in are revenues that were originally received in another fund and then transferred in to, let's say in this case, the general fund. Transfers out are not expenses of a particular fund. We're transferring the money out to another fund, or that other fund will spend the money. And that is how we classify stuff on our financial statements, on our audit reports. So you can pull the total of expenses, but it doesn't give you the entire picture of the amount of cash that's leaving a fund. If you really want to understand how much cash is leaving a fund, you need to add expenses and transfers out. If you really want to get a handle on how much cash is coming in, you need to add revenues and transfers in. So if you look historically at the general fund, we have expenses, but we also have our capital projects fund, pretty much the primary source for all of the cash that the capital projects fund needs to function comes from the general fund, and we list it as a transfer out. Every year, we also transfer out money to CANECOM. CANECOM operates out of its own fund, not the general fund. It bills the county for the county's share of its services, just like it bills all of its other subscriber entities. We are just one of those entities. So every year, the county has to transfer money out of the general fund to the CANECOM. We transfer money out to pay debt service. Debt service is paid out of other funds. So we as long as we have debt, we'll be transferring money out to pay debt service. Also vehicles. Just similar to the capital projects fund, there are some funds now, but also historically, when there's been a need for vehicles, that there isn't sufficient funding in one of our other funds, the general fund will transfer money out for vehicles, primarily sheriff vehicles, but other department vehicles as well. On the transfer inside, our IT department charges every other county fund where there are employees for services provided. So we bring in, I should say the general fund brings in probably around $770,000 a year, charging all of the other funds across the county for IT services. And then that's deposited into the general fund. And then Grand Victoria Casino funds are typically allocated to a handful of programs every year: domestic violence, economic development, and cost share drainage, and they transfer money into the general fund as well. The actual fund balance. So while all this CARES and ARPA Act, all these charges were being made, the cash was transferred into the general fund. The general fund reserve balance increased by 33.6 million. From 2020 to 2022, from 65 million to 98.9 million. Starting in 2023, the pandemic is over. We no longer can use ARPA funds for salaries and benefits. We are now seeing our first loss. So in 2023, the county's general fund decreased from 98.9 to 87, a difference of 11.2 million, because we no longer were using CARES and ARPA Act money. And I see I have a sentence that cut off there, but the general fund is forecast to use approximately 14.7 million for 2024, and that can change based on a variety of factors. Most notably, when we settle union contracts, there's usually special union contracts that are past due, although we only have a few small number of them right now. There's typically retro pay, and we have to go back and pay it, and that will affect any estimates that we do. So this was just a presentation of the original budget that was presented to the board, which is still the only draft budget that was presented. The 2025 budget would require a use of over $29 million in fund balance. And as you can see on these slides, I've got revenues, expenses, and then the difference between revenues and expenses, and then the transfers in and transfers out. And you need to take into consideration the transfers in and transfers out to get your net change. And then you add your beginning fund balance plus your net change to get your ending balance. Your 90-day forecast, your 90-day reserve target is a calculation of what is 90 days of your next year's expenses. Because that is how it should operate. We should have at least 90 days of our next year's expenses. And then the reserves in excess is what, if any, reserves do we have in excess of that 30-day amount? So you can see from 2019 to 2023, it went, or for 2022, it went up, and now it's starting to go down. The budgeted use of reserves. So we do budget, most of our special revenue funds budget a use of reserves. So in 2020, the general fund budgeted a use of reserves of 2.7. The actual use of reserves, if we didn't have the CARES and ARPA Act money, we would have needed to use almost all of that budgeted use of reserves. But we were lucky and we had the CARES and the ARPA Act money. 2021, we budgeted a use of reserves of 10 million. If we didn't have the CARES and ARPA, we would have needed 806. 2022, we budgeted a use of reserves of 3.9. If we didn't have the CARES and ARPA, we would have needed 1.9. 2023, we budgeted the 2023 budget for the general fund. We budgeted to use 16.2 million in reserves. We ended up using 11.2. This year, we budgeted to use 10 million. I think we're actually going to end up using more because our revenue was over budgeted in our 2024 budget. Because at the time the budget was put together last year, the sales tax revenue was probably estimated too high. The personal property replacement tax revenue is estimated too high. And those revenues right now are coming in under budget. So that is impacting the PPRT in particular. It's like a $2 million difference is impacting our general fund. So again, okay, so I was asked several what if scenarios. So the what if scenario, what if the county never had the CARES and the ARPA Act money? So if the county never had the CARES and the ARPA Act money, and I think this is important to understand because I do think it impacted how everybody approached the budget and how much money we had. So I think it does affect how everyone was thinking about the money that we had available in the general fund. So if the county never took that money, our fund balance in our general fund would have started decreasing in 2020. And by the end of 2023, we would have only had $49 million in total reserves in our general fund. compared to the 87 that we had. The county had only had 49 million in reserves at the end of 23. The county would have had 19 million in excess of the 90-day reserves instead of the 58 that it does have. Furthermore, if the county had never deposited this money, at the end of this fiscal year, 2024, our general fund would be ending our fiscal year with approximately only $1.9 million in excess of our 90-day reserve. The general fund would be ending its 2025 budget with only 5 million in total reserves, which is 28 million short of the 90-day target. So again, I'm repeating myself, but the CARES and the ARPA Act, the years that we use that money to pay salaries really, truly, I think skewed things. So this is the what if we never had the CARES and the ARPA Act money, this is where we would be today. And as you can see from this, the numbers that I just talked about, by the end of next year, we would only have, we wouldn't even have enough for emergency reserves. The next what if scenario is what if the county includes the COLA and the merit pool in the general fund budget. So these are the two resolutions that were just recently passed by the board to increase the cost of living from 2.5 to 3.2 and then add an additional 1% for merit pool. So just for the general fund alone, this additional cost is $388,673 just for that additional 0.07% and the additional 1%. So it's an extra use of our fund balance of 388 just for the general fund alone. And this would be the impact of that. So this is the original budget, the only budget that the county, because the only one that we can have is the one that's on public display. And if we amended that to include those additional salary items, that would be the impact. And then the last what if scenario is what if the county included the additional COLA and merit, but then cut back, required all the departments to keep their contractual services and commodities at 3% of their 2024 budget. That would only be $2.5 million, 2.3 in contractual services and little over 200,000 in commodities. And when I went through all the line items, there were a lot of departments that did keep their 2025 budget at the same amount as their 2024 budget. In fact, some reduced their contractual services and commodities below their 2024 budget. And I do want to point out, of that 2.3 million in contractual services, when you look at the details, there's 900, say close to 1 million of that 2.3 million that is on one line item, and that is sheriff, detainee, medical, dental, hospital services. The 2024 budget was 3.7, and the 2025 budget is 4.8, which is obviously more than a 3% increase. So if you cut it down to 3%, that's almost half of the increase in contractual services over 3%, is just on that one line item. Commodities, not a lot difference from the 2024 budget. There was only a 200, little over 200, call it 220,000. That was in excess of 3%. And again, almost half of that came from one line item, and it was cleaning supplies. And I am not certain of the, specifics of our history of contracts, but the buildings management department has brought in, we used to outsource most of the janitorial services. We're now bringing that in-house. We've hired employees. And again, I don't have the details of that contract, but I suspect that this increase in cleaning supplies is because we now have county employees doing the janitorial work, and we're not buying that through an outsourced contract. So the impact of reducing contractual services and commodities in the general fund to just 3% would be 2.5 million. So this is, if you applied that what if, we would still need to use 27 million in fund balance if we just made that change only. Property tax. So the county board has the option to increase the property taxes this year to the consumer price index of 3.4%, which that number is provided to us by the state of Illinois. Our current draft budget, as it stands today, does not consider a property tax increase. It only considers an increase to take into consideration new construction. The county board can recommend a property tax increase at any time. The additional, so this additional $657,000 in new construction revenue, property tax revenue that would come in from new construction currently is, let me skip ahead to 2 slides. The county is required to fund the Veterans Commission. The county has historically chosen to fund the Veterans Commission budget via property tax revenue. I believe they can use any kind of revenue, but they have traditionally chosen to fund the Veterans Commission budget with property tax revenue. So when the Veterans Commission fund budget goes up, the county applies any additional property tax revenue that they may be taking in, it applies it there. And then also, so that's what the county did because the Veterans Commission budget went up a little bit this year. And then the additional money in the draft 2025 budget was applied to the county's FICA Social Security Fund, which again, it pays payroll taxes for general fund employees because the fund balance in that fund is getting low and didn't want to be put at risk for not being able to pay payroll taxes. So I'll back up again to the previous slide. So, and I do want to point out that these numbers, these calculations are done based on using the EAV numbers that we get from the supervisor of assessments. And typically the county clerk's office looks at it too. And these numbers continued to be refined. So when the budget was put together in July, there was a rate setting EAV. It changed. I just talked to Mark Armstrong right before we started this meeting. It's changed again. So this 3.4 number, or the annual change, which is currently on the slide at 2.6, it probably is going to be higher if I plug in the new EAV number. But it's going to be lower than this one because the EAV went up since July and then it's come down a little bit. So about a month ago, the EAV number went up where it could, on a 0% property tax increase, it was going to bring in about an additional 24,000. It's gone down a little bit as of this morning. But if the county wanted to increase property taxes to the CPI, you're probably looking at somewhere between this 2.6 number here and this 2.6 number here. Probably, I'm going to take a guess. I literally just got this number, haven't had a chance to plop it into this formula, but it's probably around $267 million. And interest earned. So interest earned, again, is allocated. The county has historically allocated any interest earned that it takes in across all of the funds. The county has over 100 funds. And it's allocated at the end of each month based on the cash balance in that particular fund. Simple percentage to total formula. Once we get the interest earned dollar amounts from the treasurer's office. We plug it in and then we allocate it across all the funds. The question came up last year about being able to move interest earned around between funds, and the state's attorney's office issued an opinion which essentially gave, I'll call it a classification type, that if certain criteria were met, the interest earned could not be moved from that fund. And that was one of the attachments, spreadsheet that I attached to the packet, Schedule B. And pretty much most of the big dollar amounts are already going to the general fund. Another big fund that had a lot of money going into it is obviously ARPA and our capital projects fund. So when we did last year's budget, or 2024, when we prepared the 2024 budget, as part of that budget process, the county budgeted to transfer $1.8 million from the ARPA fund, which is fund number 355, to the general fund. So that transfer happens day one, as soon as the budget is adopted. So on December 1st, 2024, that money, that $1.8 million was transferred from the ARPA fund to the general fund. As part of this budget process, as part of the draft budget that was submitted on July 24th, 2024, in that draft budget, there is a budgeted transfer of 1.7 million from ARPA to general. Obviously, that budget has not been adopted yet, but that was what's in the budget. And then this slide shows what has been earned so far. So this is the interest that has been earned and posted to ARPA Fund 355. So since the beginning, little over 3.5 million in ARPA 355. And then there's the ARPA Revenue Recoupment Fund, just about 300,000. So a total of 3.8. And so if the budget is passed, 3.6 would be transferred. And these are estimates. The estimates that we put in our budget is based on what we think the interest amount is going to be earned, because we can't accidentally transfer too much, because if we did that, we could accidentally transfer ARPA monies to the general fund. We have only posted interest earned through April into the general ledger, because we haven't received any information on interest earned. Haven't reconciled since April. And so there's more money obviously to come and be posted, more interest earned, and we could certainly go back and transfer the additional revenue, the additional interest earned as it comes in. But that is what we have to date. Most of it, as you can see, most of it has been transferred. And then I think that's it.
I think everybody has a better understanding of how our budget was produced and what it stands for at this time. Any questions of, yes, Ms. Juby?
I have a clarifying question. So on page 26 of the packet 23 of your slide, you show using 29.689473 in our fund balance to balance the budget. That includes the COLA, that includes all of the extra things. And that's with the 2.5 placeholder for the upcoming contracts.
Yeah.
What would that dollar amount be if that 2.5 placeholder was 3.5?
The number would be greater than 29 million.
Yeah, I understand that. I can
Yeah,
do math.
I mean, I don't know.
So it's possible that we could be way over 29 million in our spending.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Surges?
Thank you, sir. Kathy, in your report, a couple of items that I that I just, and again, these might be redundant, but if so, just humor me. You had made mention of the county financial policy a couple of times. Is there a county financial policy for a balanced budget?
We,
I mean, we do not have a policy that says, that specifically addresses the use of reserves for, quote unquote, balancing the budget, other than to say it's not, it should be avoided. And I think if you
guess
look, yeah.
I have a few questions, but on that, I'm not being specific to using reserves, kind of. I mean, to me, balanced budget means revenues in versus expenses out. And then this board, you know, traditionally, we've always, you know, used the reserves kind of as that, I don't want to use the term slush fund, but kind of as a pliable fund to help offset, you know, and I get it, grants and everything else that, you know, they're projected and we use that to buffer. But do we have an actual policy that says our definition of a balanced budget is revenues in versus expenses out? And then is there some addendum that gives a description of this is when we would allow reserves to be there? I have another question that may lead into this. You had mentioned that there's some vacillation that's occurred since the temporary administrator, since the temporary Ralph had come on board, and executive finance director, that where we went from 90 days to 180 days, then back to 90 days. And that the board had approved those outlines. Is the 90 days, I'm all confused. Like, we keep saying that we want to get back to that because that's the model. That's the best practices. Best practices as in that's a mandate by the state of Illinois, or that's something that we have self-imposed, or help me understand that just a little bit. I mean, and if it's out, and there's not a right or wrong answer, I'm just wondering.
I will say this, it's very common across the government space, the government world, and also the nonprofit world for that matter, to use 90 days. I would say in particular for governments, there should be a caution to not hold on to reserves, to not build up too many reserves, because it includes tax dollars.
Mr. Surges,
Yes, sir.
the Finance Committee is directed to provide a balanced budget to the board. That's the only thing that I know of that says we have to have a balanced budget.
Okay, so Mr.
We have to present to the board a balanced budget. That's our responsibility.
But I guess that begs the question, what does a balanced budget mean? Does that mean using reserves, or is that just a traditional money in, money out? What does balance mean?
Balance means that you provide revenue from whatever source that would equal what your expenses are expected to be. So it doesn't make any difference where that money comes from the standpoint of revenue. It's just that you provide the revenue to meet the expenses. That's
Got
the
it.
only way we can balance the budget. Yeah.
Got it.
Okay.
Thank you. That
what was your
answers
other-
right now.
What was your other question or your other comment?
I'm trying to figure, no, those two, the budget requirement and then the 90 days.
Okay.
I didn't realize that we had vacillated so much on that, and if we were trying to follow a mandate or just fall into our perception of best practices.
Well, the big thing is that or 90 days or 80 days is that you have enough cash to cover bills during that period of time. If you don't have enough cash to do that, then we have
No,
to come
I
up with.
certainly understand that, but it
Okay.
seems like that we're in a big hurry to reduce that amount of cash that we're keeping in reserves. And I get really confused, Dale, as to, are we keeping it in reserves for capital expenses later on? Or are we keeping it in reserves for cash on hand for like payroll expenses?
You and I and the other 22 decide on what we want to do with that. We want to keep it for whatever reason. So it's, it's not something that's done automatically. It's saying that we decide what those reserves should be and where they are and why, how we use them. So it's nothing that dictated to us by anybody else, other than we're saying that we want 90 days cash to be able to cover our expenses for that period of time.
Best practices.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Frank?
Thank you, Chairman. In regards to the balanced budget, Mr. Chairman, you are correct. The only thing that I am aware of inside your county ordinance is essentially for the finance department to present a balanced budget. That interpretation includes reserves. So as long as you actually have reserves, that will count. The reason for 90 days is traditionally that's the balance between, have enough money for cash flow purposes and emergency funds. But the flip side to this is if you go beyond 90 days, a governmental entity opens itself up to a lawsuit for excess taxation. Every year you will receive these lawsuits against you. They usually settle, but if an accumulation becomes substantial, those type of issues can arise and become bigger and more problematic. So from a legal standpoint, those are kind of the answers on those two questions.
If I may follow up on that, John. So is it problematic to say we have reserves beyond 90 days, but those are for a capital project of some sort? A detention pond, whatever, a building,
I think you're it would be an open question as to what that means when you have the money just sitting in a general fund with no actual allocation of the money. So like if it was moved to a separate fund, like a capital projects fund, that would change the equation a little bit.
Got it.
But when it's sitting there just in a general fund, and there's no resolution or ordinance directing where the money is hopefully going, it doesn't really provide much evidence to the court that it's not just sitting there for purposes of just sitting there.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments about the discussion of our budget? Oh, Mr. Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to mention, Kathy, thank you for your detail and extensive explanation of everything. I think most of these things we had reviewed and understood, but it's always good to recap it. I have no problem with that. Ultimately, what this all comes down to is the fact that we've been overspending. Doesn't matter how it's been paid for, whether it's reserves or revenue coming in or whatever, we have overspent. But I'd like to make a couple of points about the budget and where we're at in 25 in my concerns, and it's just my own personal concerns. I believe, and I totally agree with the fact that we need to pay every employee fairly. So with respect to the COLA increase, the merit, and even the labor contracts, I'm in agreement with that. I don't think we should ever fire employees because of financial mismanagement. That should never happen. The problem is we have to stop our expense increases. Over the last 4 years, 22, 23, 24, and projected 25, we have increased our expenses by 62%, or roughly $53 million. Okay, so these are our problems. These are where we're at. This is history. How do we solve that? Well, I think we have a couple of options. Number one, we could implement the 3% increase from 24 to 25 across the board to all departments and elected officials. Number two, we could reduce reserve spending for 25 from roughly 29.6 million to 18.1 million. How would we do that? Well, first of all, I think one option would be twofold. if we eliminated 50% of the vacant positions from the 25 budget, that would reduce the amount of reserves needed by $5.25 million. The second is if we would reallocate the 6 million that the executive committee put back into the capital expenditures fund, put that 6 million back into the general fund, obviously that would increase or decrease reserve spending by an additional 6 million. Between those two areas, we'd have an 11.25 million reserve reduction, which would bring us down to about 18 million that we would have to use this year. The reason why I like that figure is instead of using roughly 30 million and using 18 million, we would then have an additional $12 million in reserve on top of roughly the 9.6 million that we'd have if we used all of it. So in essence, we would have enough reserve money to fund the 25 budget and the 26 budget. The problem is, when we look at these things, we have to anticipate, and I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I think we have to anticipate the defeat of the sales tax referendum in April. The reason why I say that is I've been involved with sales tax referendums before, and the educational process for the public is very, very intensive. It takes anywhere from 6 to 9 months at best. And at that point, once they're educated on the benefits of it, then you have really a 50-50 chance of getting that referendum passed in April. I don't think it will pass. I hope it does, but I don't think it will. And if it does not, then in 25 and especially 26, we are going to be in a position, even in 26, with the 3% increase over our 25 budget, we're looking at being over budget by $24 million with no reserves. So how are we going to handle that? Well, I think the only way that can be handled is by having to fire people. And I do not believe in firing anyone. And I think the idea that I have about reducing our vacant positions in half and reallocating the capital fund money back into the general fund will give us 2 years to prepare and hopefully get the sales tax referendum passed in November of 26. You know, I hope I'm wrong, and I hope that the sales tax referendum passes in April. But if I were a betting man, which I'm not, I would bet a nickel on the fact that it will not pass.
Any other discussion? Oh, Mr. Tepping,
Yeah, may I ask some questions?
Certainly.
please.
All right, we've already allocated many of the maintenance projects and the construction projects to ARPA funds for next year. It's already happened. So the $6 million that you're talking about taking out of the construction costs are actually for maintenance costs. And part of the problem that we ran into is that in 2020, when Madam Chair came in and I came in, maintenance had been treated so poorly in there that we had to create a whole maintenance plan. It's by building up that maintenance plan that we've been able to take care of things rather than paying for things on an emergency basis. So you now want to take $6 million out of that fund, all right? And the second thing is you now want to eliminate all vacant positions. So you in effect want to put in a hiring freeze?
I said 1/2 of the vacant position.
1/2.
Yes. And if you remember, Mr. Tepe, you had mentioned in your presentation at the last meeting that we have added 175 additional new employees to our budget over the last 4 to 5 years.
And when I talked about that, part of that was in the area where in particular, we brought people inside rather than paying for outside services. Okay. A big part of that, and in fact, the largest part of that was in the state's attorney's office, where they not only had to plan for the Safety Act, they also added personnel that went to go after various areas, one of them being child pornography, a second one being human trafficking. All of those kinds of things we approved as a board, all right? Because we felt that they were good for Kane County. So a big part of our thing has to be looking at other sources for revenue. And that's the key thing that's been kicked down the road for far too long. So we can look at budget cuts, which we will have to do in particular,
Yes.
but we've also got to look at adding revenue. Now, everybody, we reallocated the RTA tax and then the executive committee said no, okay, and put it back. We've continually failed to add any kind of cost of living increase, okay? So we've done very well by utilizing COVID funds and have saved a tremendous amount of money for our taxpayers by doing that. Now we need to replenish those funds, not by removing services from the county, but by going ahead and finding some additional revenue. That's where we should be focusing our efforts, not on cutting out positions.
You know, and I understand your comments. I think there's a couple of issues here that I think are a problem. Number one, increasing the property tax by $2.5 million will help. It's a $2.5 million increase. I'm against that. And the reason why I'm against that is if we do that, we will kill any chance of passing the sales tax referendum. Because what people are going to say is you've increased spending 16% a year for each of the last 4 years. You've increased my property taxes. Why should I vote for a sales tax referendum? You've mismanaged money. That would be their argument.
I'm sure that's your opinion,
Yeah.
okay? We don't know that
It
for a
is.
fact.
Pardon
right?
me?
We don't know that for a fact.
No, I
Right.
do not.
I think we've had enough discussion back and forth. Madam Chair?
Yes.
Mr. Berman, thank you. I would like to reference page, I don't even know, does not have the page number on here. The answer to number 4 of board members' questions regarding vacant positions. I'll read it so it's clear. At the time of the budget preparation, there were 113 vacant positions with salaries totaling $7,284,681 budgeted, of which 75 positions totaling $5,097,519 are budgeted in the general fund. Okay. Of the 75 positions budgeted in the general fund, 68 positions totaling $4,650,938 were for elected offices. So, sir, what we would have to do then is go back to our elected offices and ask them to reduce their allocation, which we just had a conversation about, by 34 positions, just for them, because it's all elected officials.
Madam Chair, I understand your position. The
Oh, it's no position. I'm just stating the fact.
Well, those are facts that you're stating. Here's another fact. In 26, if we use 29.6 million of our reserves and we have 9 million left and we have a 3% increase in the budget in 26, we're going to be $24 million unfunded.
Oh, I have no
So
argument
let's
with you.
face some realities. You know, you're right about what you're saying here, but you also have to look just a year down the road and realize I feel every increase that the employees have gotten in pay, whether it be COLA or merit, or even the labor contracts, which I don't agree with 100%. I accept that. I have no problem with that. The problem is we've got to look a little bit ahead of our nose and realize a year from now, if we use all these reserves and we don't get the sales tax referendum passed, we are going to have to fire people. And I'm not talking about 30 people. I'm talking over 100.
About 150 people, I
Yes.
estimate, if we don't move forward with something. But
All right.
my point was just clarification, that it is not coming from the government side. Most of this is coming from elected officials. So we would have to reduce their budget and mandate, because it's coming not from general, not from the government. It's coming from state's attorney, sheriff, et cetera.
My ideas are just suggestions. I'm open to any suggestion anybody in this room has on ways to cut expenses. I mean, I would love to find a way to do it, but what I'm saying in essence is we need to cut at least $10 million of reserve spending for 25. Because if we don't, we are going to be in a position in 26. And all of us that are here are going to be here next year for that. We're in a position where we could have to fire, as you said, up to 150 employees. And I am totally against that.
All right, this was just a discussion on the budget. Obviously, we already approved the budget and it's been presented. Any changes to the budget would have to be at our next meeting for that, not for the finance committee. So suggest, unless there's other questions, I suggest we move on to item C. Item C is a resolution adopting a tax levy for the general fund of $33,831,971. Do we have a motion to approve that?
Leonard moves.
Leonard moves. Do we have a second?
Lewis will second.
Motion and a second. Discussion. Ms. Juby?
So is this amount going to have to be then adjusted again?
Minimally.
Not,
No, it's not. This is the number?
at this point in time,
Oh,
unless we have a motion to change that right now.
Well, weren't we just told that it's going to be different?
it'll be slightly.
If we,
yes.
if we.
That it
put
was
the
going to be
CPI
different?
If we put the CPI in.
I would present a
Yes, but
motion.
We're adopting a tax levy for the general fund that we were just told today is different than the number that's on here. Do we need to adjust it here, or do we just wait and adjust it when it goes to the full board?
We'll adjust it here.
What is that adjustment?
I propose an amendment to this resolution that we would increase the levy for the general fund by the amount of the CPI, 3.4%, or $2.6 million, according to what our finance director presented today. That's my motion.
I'll second your motion.
Second discussion. Roll call, please.
Juby,
Should be present.
Lewis,
Lewis, yes.
Surges,
No.
Tepe,
That'd be yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, no.
Berman.
Mr. Berman. Mr. Berman?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Passes 3 yeses, 2 nos, 1 present.
Very good.
Okay.
Moving,
So that 2.6 increase already includes the 657 that's already in the budget.
That's a
So
$2 million.
It's 2.6 less 657. If you wanted to, if you're,
whatever
if
the
that's what you're doing. yeah.
3.4%. We've already taken the increase, right? It was already in.
There's new construction of 657,000 has already been included in the budget. If you went up to the CPI, the total is 2.6, but that already includes the 657 that's already in. That's been built into the original budget. So if you are raising to the CPI, it's the 2.6 minus the 657.
And that's all we can take.
Your motion incorporated the number she ultimately works out to get it up to the full CPI, so you do not need to take a new vote.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Leonard.
So, Mr. Chairman and Kathy, maybe you could explain this, what you're really looking at with the 3.4 CPI increase is about a $2 million tax increase.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Further discussion on motion? as amended. Roll call, please.
Juby,
To be present.
Lewis,
Lewis, yes.
Surges,
No.
Pepe,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, no.
Berman.
Berman, yes.
Passes 3 yeses, 2 nos, 1
Very
present.
good. Moving on, item D, a resolution adopting a tax levy for the insurance liability fund of $6,411,918.
Pepe moves.
Who was that? I'm sorry. Happy?
Wait a second.
Lewis, a second.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Juby,
Yeah.
Lewis,
Lewis, yes.
Surges,
Yes.
Pepe,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes.
Passes.
Item D, a resolution adopting a tax levy for the insurance liability fund, $6,411,918. Do I have a motion to approve?
Lewis moves.
Second,
Juby, seconds.
discussion? Roll call, please.
Did we
Juby,
advance the screen on that one?
Juby, I.
Lewis,
Yes.
Surges,
Yes.
Pepe,
Pepe, yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes.
Passes.
And item E, a resolution adopting a tax levy for the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund of $4,917,586.
Leonard moves.
Leonard moves,
Pepe
Seconds.
seconds.
full second, discussion? Roll call, please.
Are we on 6E or?
Wait a minute. No, E. On E, right?
Yeah.
E, I'm sorry.
Right, I am.
We're on F. We just did
F.
the IMRF.
Yeah, it's E,
We're on E.
E.
No, we did that one.
That one, so now we're on social security.
Okay, we're on F, the resolution adopting the tax levy for the Social Security Fund, $5,694,843.
Leonard moves.
That moves,
Juby, seconds.
discussion?
Did we advance the screen? Thank you. Sorry. Thanks.
What was the question?
Surges.
Roll call, please.
Juby,
Juby, I.
Lewis,
Lewis, yes.
Surges,
Yes.
Pepe,
Pepe, yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes. Item G, a resolution adopting a tax levy for the county highway fund of $4,010,909.
That's not the number I have in my packet. I have $5,010,909.
That's what I just said.
So you said 4 million.
Oh, I said $5,010,909. 5 million.
Did say 4, but it's number.
5 written right down here in front of me.
I know, but you said 4.
All right, Lewis moves.
Let's go.
Lewis moves.
Any, we have a second one.
No,
We have,
somebody second.
Somebody's second. for-
Pepe will second.
thank you. It's $5,010,909.
There you go.
Good.
Discussion, roll call, please.
Juby,
Juby, I.
Lewis,
Lewis, yes.
Surges,
Yes.
Pepe,
Pepe, yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes. H is a resolution adopting a tax levy for the county bridge fund, $312,695.
Lewis moves.
Juby, seconds.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Juby,
Juby, I.
Lewis,
Lewis, yes.
Surges,
Yes.
Pepe,
Pepe, yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Berman, yes. Item I, a resolution adopting a tax levy for the county highway matching fund of $65,125.
Leonard moves.
Pepe seconds.
That can be, discussion.
Question. It's not in the packet. In the order, what page was it?
It's on page
534.
534.
533 and 534.
Okay, thank you.
Roll call, please.
Juby,
Juby, I.
Lewis,
Lewis, yes.
Surges,
Yes.
Pepe,
Steffi, yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes. J is a resolution adopting a tax levy for the Kane County Health of $1,972,455.
Lewis moves.
Lewis,
Juby seconds.
Louis. Roll call, please.
Juby,
Juby, I.
Lewis,
Lewis, yes.
Surges,
Yes.
Pepe,
Steffi, yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes. Item K is a resolution adopting a tax levy for the Veterans Commission Fund of $556,215.
Leonard moves.
Lewis seconds.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Juby,
Juby, I.
Lewis,
Lewis, yes.
Surges,
Yes.
Pepe,
Steffi, yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes. Thank you. L is a resolution adopting a tax levy for the Shirewood Farm Special Service Area, $110.
Juby moves.
Julie,
Lewis seconds.
Lewis, second discussion. Roll call, please.
Juby,
Juby, I.
Lewis,
Lewis, yes.
Surges,
Yes.
Pepe,
Steffi, yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes. And item M is a resolution adopting a tax levy for Mill Creek Special Service Area, $1,039,033.91.
Lewis moves.
Lewis,
Juby seconds.
Julie, discussion?
I have a question.
Yes, Miss Julie.
Is this related to the public hearing that will be held after this meeting?
I would assume.
Yes, there's a truth and taxation necessary on Mill Creek.
So this needs to be passed first before the public hearing comes, or the public hearing needs to come before this is passed?
I would think the
Doesn't
public
make
hearing,
sense.
It does, this is a budgeted item.
It's an informational meeting for them.
Well, static. The purpose of passing this through finance is to get it to the county board agenda. It's not the final approval at this point. So the public hearing happens in advance of the county board considering the levy. So this is just the committee process, moving it to full county board. The public hearing was scheduled for 12:45 today. That's just to receive public comment.
With this amount, correct?
Yes,
Thank
that
you.
is correct amount.
Thank you.
We got a motion and a second. Now we need a roll call vote.
Juby, I.
Lewis,
Yes.
Surges,
Yes.
Pepe,
Steffi, yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes. And item N is a resolution adopting a tax levy for the Wildwood West Special Billing Area of $3,000.
Juby moves.
Lewis seconds.
Judy Lewis, discussion. Roll call, please.
Juby,
Juby, I.
Lewis,
Yes.
Surges,
Yes.
Pepe,
Steffi, yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes. O, a resolution adopting a tax levy for the Plank Road Estates Special Billing Area, $1,575.
Moves.
Juby seconds.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Juby,
Juby, I.
Lewis,
Lewis, yes.
Surges,
Yes.
Pepe,
Steffi, yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes. And item P is a resolution adopting a tax levy for the Exposition View Special Billing Area, $500.
Lewis moves.
Juby seconds.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Juby,
Juby, I.
Lewis,
Lewis, yes.
Surges,
Yes.
Pepe,
Steffi, yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes. Q is a resolution adopting a tax levy for the Pasadena Drive Special Billing Area of $1,300.
Juby moves.
Lewis seconds.
It will be Lewis. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Juby,
Juby, I.
Lewis,
Lewis, yes.
Surges,
Yes.
Pepe,
Steffi, yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes. R is a resolution adopting a tax levy for the Tamara Dittman Special Building Area of $550.
Leonard moves.
Leonard,
Juby seconds.
to be second, discussion. Roll call, please.
Juby,
Juby, I.
Lewis,
Lewis, yes.
Surges,
Yes.
Pepe,
Steffi, yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Berman, yes. S is a resolution adopting a tax levy for the Church Molitor Special Service Area, $500.
Leonard moves.
Juby seconds.
Leonard, Julie, discussion. Roll call.
Juby,
Juby, I.
Lewis,
Lewis, yes.
Surges,
Yes.
Pepe,
Steffi, yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes. Item T is a resolution adopting a tax levy for the 45W 185 Plank Road Special Service Area of $4,000.
Juby moves.
Julie,
Lewis seconds.
Lewis, second, discussion. Roll call, please.
Juby,
Juby, I.
Lewis,
Lewis, yes.
Surges,
Yes.
Pepe,
Steffi, yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes. Thank you. U is a resolution adopting a tax levy for the Boyer Road Special Service Area, $700.
Juby moves.
Judy,
Lewis seconds.
Lewis, discussion. Roll call, please.
Juby,
Juby, I.
Lewis,
Lewis, yes.
Surges,
Yes.
Pepe,
Steffi, yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes. And V is a resolution adopting a tax levy for the Crane Road Estates Special Building Area of $63,859.
Juby moves.
Julie,
Lewis seconds.
Lewis, discussion. Roll call, please.
Juby,
Juby, I.
Lewis,
Lewis, yes.
Surges,
Yes.
Pepe,
Steffi, yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Berman.
This is old business. Do we have any old business? Item 8, reports placed on file.
Ask for unanimous consent.
We last for consent to place our reports on file. Everybody agree?
Mhm.
Very good. Committee chairman's comments. Thank you, everybody, for your comments and for your participation. Executive session, not necessary. Motion for adjournment. Debbie moves. Oh, Berman will second.
Leonard seconds.
Was Jody?
Favor say aye. We're adjourned.